they use this portal to connect humanity with the future.
What are these elongated heads?
After the Great Flood, the gods turned mud into a kingdom.
Virakasha shows up mysteriously after a global flood.
Ley lines create unique portals all over the world.
Giants have been found.
Just think of what you could do consciousness-wise if you have a cranial capacity 2.5 times what you have right now.
This is why they choose this region to settle the guide for humans to understand where we are heading to, where we are going to as Earth.
Welcome back, everybody, to a new episode of Paranormal Planet Live. Thanks for being with me. I am your host, Jack Carey. You just took a look at the commercial, the trailer for the convention I will be speaking at here in less than 10 days. I will be presenting the antediluvian origins of the ancient mystery schools. Much of that information is contained in my new book here, The Enoch Code. If you're interested in ancient mysteries, then this is one of the more compelling, intriguing, interesting ancient mysteries out there. And it looks like these occult adepts who were also Renaissance painters knew the hidden, lost location of Enki's tomb, the Anunnaki prince that was forever marooned upon the earth for his betrayal of Anu, attempting to save the bloodline of Noah, which was his bloodline. All of that's contained in the Enoch Code, so take a look at it. I'm sure you will find it more than interesting. I will be traveling to Boulder, Colorado. The convention is on the 24th and 25th, and I'll be doing a 1-hour presentation on that subject. So if you are an Ancient Civilizations fan, the series from Gaia, or just interested in ancient mysteries themselves, then come on up to Boulder and join us. And it's going to be some really interesting presentations out there. So today we will be examining the legendary Shootout at the alien base at Dulce, New Mexico, under the Archuleta Mesa. New information has come to light, new analysis, new investigation. And what better time than now during this period of government disclosure of UFOs and alien life on this planet than to turn our attention back to this famous case that is really intriguing and endlessly engrossing. And it's interesting because alien bases in general are beginning to garner a lot of attention now that the public is beginning to awaken to the fact that the government is in fact telling them that aliens are real. So we're going to examine a lot of this breaking paranormal intelligence news that's been going on. There has just been a ton of it coming out lately. So It's something that we should go over before we get into Dulce and the new findings there, which are really interesting and exciting. If you have been paying attention to economic news, then you will know that the Woo World predictions of all of this economic turmoil that's occurring was in fact correct, and something that I covered here on the show months ago, talking about the hyperinflation and how all of that is actually connected to ongoing UFO disclosure. If you're interested in those connections, then they're going to be in episodes that are about 2 months back. There is really no end in sight to the hyperinflation problem, according to people that have the inside information that I was referring to, and Cliff High and his Alta reports, etc. You're probably going to continue to see an acceleration of the current situation to a point of a breaking point. So it's going to be interesting to really see how all of this unfolds, how it manifests. You can see that the predictions made in those Alta reports I spoke of, regarding the end of the US dollar as the reserve currency and how that was connected to a lot of the paranormal and Woo World news that was going on at the time. It's fascinating to actually to see it all unfolding right before our very eyes. So here are some of the books I've published. Please check them out. Your support helps continue the channel here and the depth of research that I do for the public. And come by and check out the Paranormal Intelligence Agency website, paraintelagency.com. And you will see all the latest and greatest stuff going on at the Paranormal Intelligence Agency, including a photograph of what might be a new cryptid of some kind. It is certainly the only photograph of this kind of creature I believe in existence, and it may in fact be a very real photograph of a reptilian alien. So that is also available to subscribers, and there's going to be some interesting content I'm about to add on there for our subscribers. It's been a really busy time. First off, on our paranormal intel breakdown is an interesting article about the new Pentagon report, basically stating without a doubt that there are UAPs, as they like to call them now, that are not man-made and who are a threat and whose threat is increasing exponentially. That is not just one headline, but that's a headline that's actually been on quite a few different online magazines and news sources that are out there. Fox News yesterday during the day actually talked about this exact same thing. And so you're just seeing a continuation of what we've been discussing. This is full-on UFO disclosure, and I think that those who have been naysayers this whole time saying, oh, they're going to, pull the rug out from under us just as we get to the point of them saying it's alien life, are clearly in error now. It's clear the government is at least elements within the government and the intelligence community are fully engaged in trying to wake the public up to the threat of the alien presence on this planet. And yes, it is a threat. I do not agree with Dr. Greer in any way, shape, or form, and I feel like the disinformation that he puts out is a great disservice to the human species and to our possible annihilation. I mean, let's face it, when you are dealing with a life form as advanced as these are, you could very well be looking at the end of your species as you know it. Yes, they have been here for a long time, but it's only been since 1961 that they have been fully engaged in their genetic program, which is something that even Fox News has now become focused on with their special on alien abduction with Abby Hornacek, something I discussed previously. So interesting stuff out there. There's still a lot of conflict within the UFO community, disclosure community. People like John Greenwald at the Black Vault, who for some reason has a problem with Lou Elizondo, who is clearly, who he says he is. There's more than enough documentation to back up his claims, and the fact that there are elements within the government actively trying to, throw up roadblocks where Elizondo is concerned, I think is telltale enough. So I don't quite understand what the Greenwald issue is with Elizondo. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. In the end, what you're seeing is something that we never thought would occur, which is full-on public disclosure. It is not the fault of those who are attempting to disclose that the public just doesn't want to pay attention. It's not their fault. The public is fearful. And, they don't like to entertain anything that scares them, and they don't like to entertain anything that is going to cause them to have to work, because people are inherently lazy, and that is just the way it is in our society. And right now, the UFO phenomenon should be the only thing on everyone's lips, and it's the last thing that people really bring up at the dinner table. And we've got to change that. So there is some interesting stuff going on, guys. The fact that this document says that they are not man-made and represent a serious threat is very interesting. And, you have to realize that the public is going to be slow to acknowledge this because of just how scary that reality is. For people like you and I here in the paranormal world, it's not nearly as scary because we've entertained the notion of all of this for so long. But you have to realize that our society is made up of largely of people who never have entertained the notion. And I refer to these people as the white picket fencers, the normies, the guys out there that are content to live in a bubble of illusion and not entertain anything outside of that, which might, cause them to become disillusioned, if you will. So, and before I forget it, guys, make sure you do take a look at our last crypto field operation video. Our Washita Bigfoot project is really, really progressing, and we're making some amazing finds out there. That's all on the last video I released. The bone pit that we discovered is something that we've come across before, and even so, I took the footage and showed it to some outdoor experts and other hunters that have been hunting for 40, 50 years to get their reactions, and it's been interesting. We have really discovered some promising signs out there, including the possible gravesite of a Bigfoot. And I say that with all soberness. This is in the exact area, and the stone structure fits the exact eyewitness description as to how they are built. And initial diggings around the area are ongoing, but extremely difficult due to the terrain. So there will be much more coming out on that, but we are making huge progress in our effort to secure final discovery of the Bigfoot species. And yes, that is our end goal with this project, and we believe we have a very high likelihood of doing just that. So stay tuned. So next up on our Paranormal Intelligence report is an interesting article about a new manuscript that's been discovered in Russia, talking about kind of a lost series of expeditions undertaken by a highly respected scientist in Russia at the time. And it's interesting because some of their field reports taken from the countryside talk about some things that we should take note of. It says in one particular spot here in the article, it states, in Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan, there were reports of mountain skulking cryptids, quote, naked man bears, with piercing midday howls, tall, hairy creatures that petulantly kicked over tents, and rhubarb foraging troops of camel-haired beasts standing on two legs. Even grisly murder scenes where victims' livers had mysteriously been plucked from their backs. Their prime suspect was the mysterious Yeti, better known in the Caucasus as Almasty. So it is a very interesting report. One of the principal things that caught my attention here is the descriptions of murder scenes involving these creatures where the liver of the victim had been removed. That's something that we find here in the United States with deer and elk who appear to have been predated on by Bigfoot. Many times they will basically make a rip on the side of the animal and simply take the liver out. The liver is has the highest nutrition value of anything in the forest, and it's something that any biologist will tell you is extremely nutrient rich. And here are accounts of them actually doing this to humans in Russia. I found that extremely interesting. And the use of the term man bear also sticks out in that here in the U.S. we have the Paiute Indian tradition that I speak of in my book Bigfoot Unleashed, that talks about how there was a fake moon or a false moon, obviously a UFO, that descended from the sky and deposited what the Paiute called 3 crazy bears into the forest. And I find that interesting because here you have the indigenous people of the Caucasus also referring to them as man bears. So this is an interesting article. This comes out on mainstream media. I mean, this is a Vice.com article. And it came out just a couple of days after Fox News was talking about this new UFO revelation and how many of these craft are, in fact, could not be man-made. And in the same little news break that they were talking about this, they bring up Bigfoot. I found that very, very interesting. And so I honestly think that you're seeing what I predicted, which is ongoing disclosure of the Bigfoot mystery and species, along with the UFO disclosure, because there is such a close relationship between the two. It is something that I chronicle in depth in my book, Bigfoot Unleashed, and theorize about why that connection is there. So, very interesting stuff that's out there right now. Next up on the intelligence briefing is this new UFO video put out by Tom DeLonge from one of his inside sources. This is one of the many UFO videos apparently that are in, military has possession of, and this is yet another one that was leaked out to the ATIP program, or actually TTSA to the stars. So, Elizondo et al. Have talked a lot about the fact that there are numerous military UFO videos out there, and that many of them are far more compelling than the ones that the public has been shown so far, including one I'm told that was filmed from the cockpit of an F-18 of a UFO that was just mere feet from the cockpit, and that is one that will probably be released pretty soon. Careful review of OSINT sources on Twitter and elsewhere show that, in fact, there are 24 such videos that were requested by Greenwald at the Black Vault. So we know, or 24 videos that the government acknowledges exist. So there's 24 of these out there that could have some pretty spectacular footage on them. And so kind of the tug of war is still going on between elements in the Pentagon that don't want some of this video footage released, and the battle continues. Probably some of this footage is so compelling that there is simply no denying the alien component to it all. So it's been an interesting little while in the paranormal world. Let's get to it. Okay, tonight's main topic is the alien base at Dulce, New Mexico, under the Archuleta Mesa, and this is a topic that's getting a lot of renewed attention of late, and some of the who I believe to be the best remote viewers out there have recently targeted the base at Dulce with some interesting findings, and so I thought it would be a good time to review the mystery of Dulce in light of what they have been able to corroborate. The history of the Dulce mystery is fascinating, and I thought it would be worthwhile to review the mystery as a whole from the beginning to where we are present day, because they may help us to discover new things about the mystery. And there are some really interesting, things going on right now out in Dulce, New Mexico. So recently, the Farsight guys have targeted Dulce, and their findings, combined with a analysis of the mystery as a whole leads us into some interesting directions. And the town of Dulce in New Mexico didn't come into existence until the end of the 19th century, when U.S. authorities ordered the local Apache tribe to settle itself permanently in one place. And this area has been known among the people there as being an area of high strangeness. The Native American population, who are the Hickoria Apache, complied with the U.S. government's instructions to settle in one place, and the town of Dulce was built up around their reservation, and it's right on the slopes of the Archuleta Mesa. And there had always been tales of high strangeness associated with the region, from weird light anomalies witnessed in the night sky to Bigfoot-like creatures seen wandering the scrub. But by the late 1970s, the looming shadow cast by this towering mountain peak would begin to take on a sinister connotation with the discovery of a series of bizarre cattle mutilations. Following several complaints by ranchers and farmers to the local police department insisting that someone or something was slaughtering their livestock, an officer by the name of Gabriel Valdez was ordered to investigate the matter. But after visiting the affected properties, the investigator often returned to his superiors with far more questions than he ever had answers for. And usually only one animal in the herds which were targeted had been affected, and it had been dispatched in a manner which seemed to discount the involvement of any natural predator. And although key sensory and internal organs had been removed from the carcasses, there were never any indications that the flesh had been consumed by a normal predator. In fact, these bodies would remain untouched by scavengers for weeks after the event, a phenomenon previously unheard of within this harsh and relenting environment, if you've ever been to this area. The report submitted by Officer Valdez also highlighted the lack of disturbance in the soft and sandy ground surrounding the remains, offering no hint as to who or what could possibly have caused it. And this is something we're all familiar with now. The cattle mutilation phenomenon is also being focused on by Fox News yet again. And it became apparent to Valdez and his superiors that that there was something really strange going on here, and that was really the beginning of the cattle mutilation phenomenon as we understand it modern day. And this was really kind of in the shadows of Archuleta Mesa. Then during the mid-1990s, a former Air Force technician by the name of Thomas Costello went public, confirming that there was indeed a hidden facility underneath the Archuleta Mesa. More incredible still was that Costello claimed that this was not an extraterrestrial base, but one constructed by the United States government, where aliens and human scientists worked together on genetic experiments. Costello related how he had been a U.S. Air Force photographer based at Dulce and in Las Vegas, but in the early 1970s had been transferred to the secret Dulce base in New Mexico. While he was there, he was responsible for maintaining the facility's extensive surveillance network and for documenting some of the work being conducted in the laboratories. Costello even went as far as to offer photographic evidence with his testimony of what he purported to be some form of alien hybrid suspended in a vat of fluid in one of the labs. But barely had journalists time to digest his claims that the Dulce base was just one of many such facilities, linked by a vast underground railroad network before he disappeared from public completely. However, his claims would later resurface when a further whistleblower came forward, this time from within the ranks of the Dulce Police Department itself. This was a former reservation police detective named Avery Tafoya, who had been researching the testimony of Jerry Julian related how he had stumbled across the report written by federal agents. And to his amazement, in addition to the events described by the victim, they had included detailed drawings of a sprawling military facility exactly where Julian claimed the hidden opening in the mountain was situated. The drawing depicted that the base had 7 different levels, including accommodation blocks, storage facilities, and laboratories. It was also serviced by an underground train network similar to that alleged by Thomas Costello. Armed with this information, Tafoya stated that he had made a number of attempts to climb the mountain and see the facility for himself, only to be defeated by adverse weather conditions on each and every occasion. Not to be deterred, he had then used a thermal camera to document strange apertures and vents built into the rock of the mountain and recorded what sounded like strange, large machines being operated beneath the slopes. Over the years, the United States military has gone to great lengths in denying that Dulce Base exists or that it's part of a network of hidden underground facilities, or so-called DUMBs. And it would seem that part of their strategy to do so has involved a concerted effort to undermine the credibility of those making the claims. The background of Thomas Costello remains shrouded in uncertainty, with attempts to locate and review his military service record seeming to suggest he never existed. Photographs associated with this testimony have proven to be forgeries, and no formal interview with him has ever been unearthed. Members of the intelligence community have also come forward and admitted to deliberately feeding false information to a man named Paul Benowitz concerning Dulce Base. During the summer of 1995, a man named Phil Schneider gave a series of lectures across the United States, and he went to great pains to highlight to his audience the dangers that he was taking. He spoke of the murder of one of his close friends, which he alleged had been made to look like a suicide. And he related various attempts on his own life and threats to harm his family in an effort to stop him from sharing confidential military secrets to the public. But Schneider explained that his love for his country suspended any thoughts for his personal safety, and that the American people had a right to know the potential dangers which their government were capable of. He would open his talks often by explaining how he came from a family of public servants and how his father was involved in the Manhattan Project. And he would reveal to those present his missing fingers, that he often showed, relating how he lost them while fighting in this battle at the Dulce base. And he would often hold up strange metals and minerals, claiming that they were byproducts of experiments. He would then explain in great detail how there was a vast network of underground military bases beneath the surface of North America, linked together by miles and miles of magnetic train tracks. And finally, he would close his lectures by saying that when his time came, just like his friend, his murder would be made to look like a suicide, reiterating that he had no wish to end his own life. Less than a year later, the impassioned public speaker would indeed be found dead in his apartment, his death perhaps unsurprisingly to anybody who had ever heard him speak, ultimately being ruled a suicide. And this was despite the fact that he was strangled with his own catheter cord, with his handgun just in the other room that he owned. So they wanted us to believe, or want us to believe, I suppose, that he committed suicide by choking himself with his catheter cord rather than simply shooting himself with his own handgun that was just in the other room. And many researchers do believe that Phil Schneider was in fact murdered for his acts of disclosing all this information. But just like Thomas Castillo had done before him, Schneider told anyone who would give him the time that there was a military base hidden deep beneath Archuleta Mesa. And unlike the enigmatic Costello, Schneider chose to deliver his evidence in a far more public manner, speaking openly to roomfuls of interested people and fielding any questions they might have concerning his accounts. He described how, since the end of the Second World War, the United States government had been building a vast network of underground bases around the country, 129 of them to be exact. Schneider explained that, to his knowledge, these bases were hidden, all around the country, and that they had equipment capable of boring 7 miles of this tunneling a day. 9 of these bases were clustered in close proximity to one another, located in and around Groom Lake near the infamous Area 51 testing facility. And all of these bases were linked by a seemingly endless series of tunnels which housed a maglev train line, allowing workers to travel between locations at speeds of up to Mach 2. As he stood and summarized how these tunnels had been created and how each of the secret bases had been constructed, audiences found themselves visibly impressed by the level of technical detail Schneider used. Having listed his credentials as a geologist and structural engineer, he related how he had been brought onto the project to assist with the complicated and advanced construction methods being used. The maglev tunnels had not been drilled or blasted through the ground, but had instead been created using laser technology that vitrified and melted its way through the earth. In order to create each base, 4 gaping holes were bored into the earth, and each separate floor was then blasted out of the rock before being linked up to these 4 gigantic corner shafts. And it was amidst the construction of one of the facilities in New Mexico during the late 1970s that Phil Schneider became an unwitting participant in what would become known as the Dulce War. Schneider maintained that in August of 1979, construction on the Dulce base began to fall behind schedule due to issues relating to the drilling of one of the corner columns. The facility was being tunneled out beneath the southwest corner of Archuleta Mesa, but every time the drilling team had attempted to pass a certain depth, they found their machinery was mysteriously failing. And in an effort to discover what was frustrating the drilling operation, Schneider and a Green Beret bodyguard had been lowered into the incomplete shaft. And as soon as he stepped out onto the crane basket into what appeared to be a pre-existing cave network, he had instantly realized that something was very wrong. And there was a bitter and unnatural stench in the air as the drilling operation had now allowed ancient gases to escape from this void, along with a mysterious and city residue on this unusually smooth walls of these caves that he described. And it was at this point that a tall and slender gray figure had suddenly stepped out in the shadows in front of him, carrying what appeared to be a weapon of some description. Ultimately, and utterly terrified by this creature's unearthly and intimidating appearance, Schneider had used his sidearm to kill it, only for 2 more of them to emerge in this cavern. Backing towards the crane basket and firing wildly, the engineer had managed to kill one of the pair, only for the other to use its weapon and ultimately caused him grave bodily injury. Schneider was instantly consumed by this eerie blue light and felt a huge jolt of electricity burst through his body, and it cut him wide open. When he came to, he found himself being carried in the crane basket by a Green Beret who had turned and engaged more of the creature's during this fight. Upon his return to the surface, the doctors who treated Schneider found severe damage to both his left hand and foot, and his fingers and toes were completely severed off and missing. After he had explained to his superiors what had taken place, he was removed from the project, but later discovered that construction had continued despite his encounter, which is really fascinating. And for the next year, it was alleged that further battles beneath the mesa ensued as U.S. Special Forces clashed with alien interlopers who appeared intent on frustrating the construction of the base itself. And Schneider claims that in total, 66 soldiers and countless extraterrestrials lost their lives before an uneasy peace was finally formed between the two opposing sides. And this is something that was targeted by the Farsight guys. He goes on to allege that the aliens who had been residing beneath the mesa had worked with humans ever since, creating numerous scientific breakthroughs which had gone on to assist mankind, as well as some pretty horrific genetic experiments that were that have also been described as taking place there. So throughout 1995, Schneider continued to tour the United States, and he gave all of these talks talking about this along with other conspiracies and about all of these deep underground military bases. And over the course of these lectures, it soon became apparent that the former engineer was beginning to struggle. He described how he had been involved in a shootout with federal agents, killing one in self-defense, and how an attempt had been made to kidnap his daughter in a bid to force him to stop delivering his lectures. And then in January of 1996, 2 months after his final speech in Denver, federal agents arrived at the home of Schneider's ex-wife, Cynthia. They explained how Phil had been found dead in his apartment in Wilsonville, having apparently decided to take his own life, which we all suspect was not the case. The agents went on to conduct a search at Cynthia's house, removing any notes or materials relating to Phil and his lectures before then leaving. Also extremely telltale. Circumstances surrounding Schneider's death have always raised questions about the speed with which the authorities moved to attribute it to suicide. And Phil's body had been found slumped between his bed and wheelchair, with a rubber catheter hose having been wrapped around his neck 3 times and tied off with a knot. So both of his feet were wedged hard underneath the bed, with his head resting on the seat of the wheelchair at an angle that would not appear to have been easy or natural for him to have achieved. And there were traces of blood on the floor nearby, but no injury or wounds found on the body itself to suggest where this may have come from. When the family later asked if a suicide note had been discovered, they were told that the paper seized from the address had now inexplicably gone missing from a police storage facility. Subsequent requests for additional toxicology testing on Schneider's remains were refused on the grounds of adverse costs, considering the cause of death had already been established. And further and more adamant demands for these tests would also be refused because the samples had apparently been destroyed by the laboratory. Fascinating. One detective who later spoke privately with the family stated that with the missing fingers on Schneider's left hand, it would have been almost impossible for him to have tied off the catheter himself. And when the officer in question shared these concerns with his superiors, he had been ordered to keep his observations to himself before then being reassigned to a different case. It appears that even in death, Phil Schneider was continuing to raise awkward and uneasy questions for those in positions of authority. And so that it really kind of catches us up and brings us to the present findings of the Farsight group and how their findings, which will be released either today or tomorrow, which detail blind targeting of the Dulce event as described by Phil Schneider, were largely accurate. They, like I said, blind targeted all of this and were able to determine that that a base is in fact there, that this conflict did occur. And it's interesting because there are some insights that you know, one doesn't really think of much. For instance, the insight that the aliens had chosen this particular base and or this particular mesa and geography of this area for the same reason that the U.S. military later ends up choosing it to build an underground base, because it was perfect for building this type of facility. And that it appears as though, you know, it was happenstance, it was coincidence that the aliens had already built and established this base, you know, long before humans had come along and were building another base and happened to stumble upon them, which facilitated this entire event, which is truly fascinating. Now, the Farsight remote viewing finds and the video footage of their viewers actually going through all of their findings should be released in the next day or two. And that's something to definitely look forward to. So anyway, it's a fascinating case. It's fascinating that these viewers were given this as a blind target, and that a lot of their the details they were able to come up with in their blind targeting ended up matching pretty perfectly with a lot of the details in the accounts that were given by Phil Schneider. So fascinating stuff, guys, and maybe one day, you know, Phil Schneider will get justice for what was obviously a murder. So, and that's all I've got for you guys tonight. I appreciate you coming back this week. Like I said previously, summertime, especially right now, have been putting out a Paranormal Planet every week because of the sheer amount of cryptozoology field work that I am currently engaged in during the summertime months here. So join me next week. We will have yet another amazing paranormal mystery to delve into. And until then, guys, be safe out there, and I will see you later.